Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion, and we have 2 episodes left in the Everybody Loves Raymond reviews for season 1. And now we're coming to an episode that when I normally marathon the show season by season, this is an episode I usually skip. Now, let me go through the season 1 episodes and look at how many of those would fit the criteria. Disc 1, I usually watch all 5. Disc 2, all 5. Disc 3, all 5. If I ever feel like skipping one, it's usually Debra's sick. Disc 4, I watch all of them. And then with this one, I usually watch first episode and then the last one, and usually skip this one. Before my rewatch for this video, I think I've watched it 2, maybe 3 times since I've had this disc, this set, in the last decade plus. So that should tell you something about this episode. Like, I barely remembered anything about this episode before going back to rewatch it, except for one moment where Frank is like, "I'm not listening anymore, doo-dah, doo-dah." But, rewatching it for this, I was a little pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it more than I remember enjoying it from my last reviews, but there was also some parts about it, mainly involving Debra, that left a sour taste in my mouth. And I'll get to that as I go through it. One thing I actually kind of liked, and this is more a retrospect thing, because I didn't notice this the first time, because I wasn't into that show yet, is that there is a Star Trek actor in this episode guest starring. That, of course, is, if I can find her in my notes, that would be... Alright, here we go. Mary Kay Adams, who plays Dr. Nora. You might remember her from Deep Space Nine as Grilka, or as some people like to call her, Quark's ex-wife. And of course, her photo as Grilka is actually the main photo on her IMDb page. That's why I was looking through the cast. I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, it is her. Nice. Now, the voice-wise, she enunciates a little bit differently as Dr. Nora, but if you listen carefully, you can definitely see it's her. And she's kind of the catalyst for this whole episode, because it begins with Ray coming home like he would on an average day. Deborah's on the phone, and it turns out she called into Dr. Nora's radio show, somehow got through. And then afterwards, Dr. Nora actually wants to set up an interview thing for her latest book, which is about, as she calls it, a vanishing breed in America, the housewife, which is a little funny to hear nearly 20 years later, because technically, I think housewives, or house spouses, I should say now, because of the nature of relationships, still do exist. It's just the dynamics a bit differently now, depending on the relationship. Husbands and wives will share responsibilities, and other ones, it might be the man that stays home while the woman goes out. Same-sex relationships might also be a little bit of balance. So many other ways to do it. It's not going to be the old thing like, "Lucy, I'm home," that whole thing. Or like how we see in this, where Deborah's home all day doing everything and Ray earns the money. And it's probably for the best that the archetype one is dying out, and then we got something new to replace it. I'm not going to get into that there, only to say that for me personally, I would share the responsibilities. Like, I love cooking. I mean, if I ended up with someone that did not like cooking, I would have no issue taking over all of that. After the show ends, Nora calls Debra back and sets up the interview. And after that call ends is where the problem that I have with this episode begins, and that is Debra's attitude. She starts to set everything up to try to make their family appear idealistic, like the ideal family that is run by the archetypical family, which is, husband, breadwinner, housewife, that whole dynamic. And just the way she is, Deborah's so pushy about it, and you're like, you're just shaking at least I was just shaking my head watching this, like, really? Maybe as a kid or teenager watching this, maybe that's why I was put off by this episode and blocked out most of it from my memory. Just watching this, I'm just shaking my head. I mean, there are moments in the entire show that you don't like Debra, but I think this is probably one of the episodes where that is taken to the nth degree. And that stands out for me, considering that this episode was also written by Jeremy Stevens, the man who wrote the previous episode, Brother, The Ride Along, other ones, in which Debra is in a lot of those ones, but I don't think she has a big role like she does in this one. So that tells me either he's not the best at writing Debra as a character when she's the central focus, or given how early in the show's run we were, here she decided to write her worse. And I think it's more than that because he also wrote Your Place or Mine, where while she's not one of the central focuses, she does have some good dialogue in one of the later scenes that does help resolve the whole conflict in that episode. Whereas here, he basically makes her the central conflict of the episode, where she wants to make everything seem fake, which you can kind of understand because she thinks her life is boring, it seems. I mean, this is a thing that comes up a couple other times later in this series, but I think it's done way better there. If you want a case in point, just look at the episode, I believe it's in season 3, where Ray and Debra go on, they don't call it that, but it's essentially a second honeymoon. And Ray picked a place because there's a chocolate factory and there's a tour, and Debra's afraid that once that's over, Ray's going to be bored and he's just going to be stuck in the room with the boring housewife. And that's the inflection she uses in the episode, so don't get on me. Here, it's just her wanting to look prim and perfect for the doctor. And everything seems alright with it at first, but the one thing that she says that really got under my skin involving it is when she tells Ray to tone it down on his humor because she doesn't like it. It's like, really? You don't like the sense of humor? You married him. Which leads into another thing she says that I really hated. If I wasn't doing this series, I would have probably just turned the episode off right then and there. If I was watching this on TV first run, I'd probably be like, I'm out. And that is, I'm probably not going to get the line itself right. I probably should have written that down in the notes, but basically she's implying that it's not believable she'd be with someone like Ray. Which, if you just look at them from a look standpoint, you can kind of understand it. I mean, that's a running gag that Ray brings up a couple more times, but just the way she says it, it's like, whoa, Debra, tell us how you really feel. You trying to say you think that you should not be with someone like Ray? If that's the case, you probably shouldn't have married him in the first place. Just the way she says it, it's like, if it was me, I probably would have just walked out of the room if I was in Ray's place. I'd been like, all right, you can do the interview. You can see Nora by yourself then. I wouldn't have placated her. But Ray sucks it up and placates her, goes about it. When Nora shows up, Debra goes and takes the kids up. And then the Barones show up and everything goes off the rails. And this is where the fun part of this episode goes. And this is where the episode redeems itself a bit. Just seeing Nora react to the Barones, just seeing her sit there watching them all. And you could tell the wheels in her head are slowly turning like, I can use this. Oh, this is a gold mine for my book. What I had before would have been good material for a chapter to help accentuate my main point, but oh, what I'm seeing right now, ooh, this could be a whole other book project. Yeah. The type of project that writers could search their entire careers for, and here she found it just by happenstance. And just seeing Debra's reaction when it comes down the stairs to see that her whole plan is going to hell. And after that, Nora does not even talk with her, maybe just in passing. And she's trying to say stuff to get Nora to pay attention to her, even bringing up her and Ray's sex life, but nope. And then, of course, this is where that aforementioned moment, I'm not listening anymore, comes. And, of course, after this, we see Debra's all mad, complaining to Ray about how their parents ruined everything, which something we're going to hear a lot in the future and something we're going to hear a lot before, but this is one of those times where Debra does not have any sympathy with me over it, and that's mainly because of what she said before Nora showed up. That whole thing, it's like, Debra, you don't really have a lot of sympathy for me in this episode regarding that. I mean, Patricia Heaton plays it well, and I think maybe that's part of the point, but it's also part of the problem, is that she plays it pretty well, so I can't really complain about that, but it's what she's playing, the writing, that makes me not sympathize with the character. And maybe that was the writer's point, considering what happens later. But it's still one of those ones that's like, oh, I mean, if this is professional wrestling, it'd be like, because in that, when it's the person you're supposed to hate, you're supposed to boo them, and if they get you to, they're doing a good job. But in something like this, it's like, Of course, near the end of the episode, the Barones do try to cheer her up, asking Debra stuff about, you know, how good she is and all that. But you can definitely tell the way they're acting it, that they're making it clear that they're not really interested, which doesn't help. But I'm guessing it also goes hand in hand with the Barones not being good at doing stuff like that. I mean, it's just like in the second episode, I Love You, where they're trying to be all lovey-dovey. That came out more natural, though, than this whole thing. Then, of course, we find it doesn't help when we find out that they're getting a picture taken for Nora's book, which just makes Debra feel even worse. And the remaining part of the episode, I don't really remember, but I think by this part, I'm really blocking everything out because of how much I hate that thing involving Debra. But that's just me. I mean, if this is one of your favorite episodes, power to you, but I just could not put this. I mean, this is probably the closest in the series so far to a rant, but as far as I can remember, the only episode that's probably going to have a straight-up rant in the title is not going to be till Season 6, and that's going to be Raybert. In case you're wondering, has to do with the beginning part of that episode, but because that part I really hate even more than even just remembering it, and that's also another episode I usually skip. But just here with Debra, it's like, let's see what other things I have in the notes. Oh yeah, this was, since I skipped this one, I always forgot about this little sports figure cameo, and that was Desmond Howard. His little cameo, he's talking with Ray at a bar, and it's basically showboating and handing in the article. It entails him asking Ray, like, so how'd you hand your article in? Because I guess his editor wasn't enthusiastic when he got the article. It's like, well, how'd you hand it in? Just like he normally did. He's like, you got to do it with a bit more flair. Kind of fun the way it's played, and Desmond and Ray do have a little chemistry going back and forth there. But all in all, it's just not as fun as the other ones. One thing I forgot to mention earlier when I brought up Jeremy Stevens is that unlike the previous episode, and I also believe the first one he wrote in this season, he did not write this one alone. It's a weird little credit thing because it credits him and Tucker Colley to the teleplay, and it credits Kathy Ann Stump and Lou Schneider for the story. So those two probably came up with the gem of the idea and maybe wrote like an outline, and then Jeremy and Tucker did this teleplay together. Or it could be that one did the initial draft, Jeremy did another draft, or Jeremy did the first draft and he did the second one. If they didn't write it together and it's just credited and just, because they're the ones that did the drafts, I could see it being Jeremy wrote the initial one and then Tucker came back and did the changes. If they wrote it together, how Debra is, I'd probably blame more on Tucker. That's just me hypothesizing there, but the fact that it's multiple writers and a couple other people came up with the story, the whole writer's room thing, that probably explains it. And I guess it goes to show that not everything that's written by committee in a writer's room for a sitcom is going to be gold. But, hey, you can't all be gold. There's got to be at least one bad idea in there. And other than the middle part involving the Barones, not really much to praise about this other than the acting and maybe how the episode's shot. All in all, for me, this is an episode that you can skip. And now we move on to the finale. And the one that christened the ending season flashback, at least for the first 6 seasons. And it's another one that would definitely be in the top 10 of season 1.